Ryan. So how did you get to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
Well, pretty much raised in Oregon, years old. Confirming that with my mom, she started studying in the 70s, in 1976, in fact, and then got baptized in 1977. So I was pretty young. I remember as a child watching cartoons in the bedroom and walking to the living room and seeing my mom with these two women. She was sitting across from them. Looked like they were looking down at the floor. And I was kind of wondering what they were looking down at. So I looked and then looked up at them, and they had their eyes closed, And later on, I realized and learned that they were actually praying. So, yeah, from a pretty young age.
I like that. Just the curiosity of a child. What are these people looking at on the floor?
Yeah.
So your mom started studying then 76, 77. So then it doesn't go back anywhere before then. There's no other witnesses in your family anywhere else before then? Okay.
They just sisters. They were twin sisters. Were preaching. Got my mom at home and started witnessing to her.
Okay. All right.
No other witnesses that I know of in my family.
Okay. So, growing up from a young age as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, what was the worldview it gave you? How did you see the world around you?
Well, from a pretty young age, too. I remember some things from the meetings. And the things that kind of stuck out in my mind, even as a young boy, was, be good and Jehovah will be happy with you. You don't want to make him sad. The world is bad and Jehovah is going to destroy all bad people. And all the religions are bad. And don't be like Satan, rebellious. And I remember a short time later, my book of Bible stories book came out. And so I remember being kind of fascinated with the pictures and all. And that's when kind of more of the indoctrination really began, as I started, looking at that and studying with my mom.
Yeah, my book of Bible stories, those images in that book, they're very gripping. And when now when I look back at it and I think about it, for children to be exposed to those images, it's funny, we weren't supposed to watch violence on TV or whatever, but that book is full of violent images, very impactful, violent images that little kids are reading. It's, no wonder that book makes such an impact on kids.
Just real quick on that idea of violence. I remember a friend of mine had a son. This is, years later in my late 20s, 30s. And his son came up to him and said, "Dad, is Spider-Man violent?" And he had said, yes to his son. And that got me thinking, because I'm like, well, just about everything on TV can be classified as violent some way, either mild or more violent. And after thinking about it, especially since when I started fading, I had a lot more time to thinking, well, the Bible's violent. I said, my goodness, if you just take certain, scriptures in Joshua or so forth, like David, for example. I mean, in order to marry Saul's daughter, he had to go and give, I think, was it 1,000 foreskins or whatever. So if you want to really picture that, he's like stabbing them, killing them, then lifting up their skirt, chopping their, privates off and throwing them in a pile. I mean, that's not only nasty, but that's really violent. We saw that on TV. They'd be like, no, you can't watch that. That's horrible violence. Jehovah hates violence, So then I used to say, if anyone questioned that, well, I don't watch anything more violent than the Bible. Is how I would answer.
I like that.
Crazy.
So, growing up in that environment, so let's just talk about your home life a little bit when you were growing up. How were things at home for you? Were you all the family that studied a lot, or, what was kind of the environment in your own home?
So we didn't study. My mom didn't study with me a whole lot. She tried, but home was very a volatile place. So her and my dad fought a lot. and at a young age, I grew up in New York, and at a young age, we wind up leaving. So she got my stuff packed up and moved, and we stayed with other witnesses, and at times with other worldly, quote unquote, worldly family. And so it felt like my life was constantly in a state of flux because I would go from one place to another, from one school to another, one congregation to another. And so things were constantly in flux. Even eventually we did make it back to the original house I grew up in. My dad moved out and then we wound up staying. But it was constant moving and not showing where we were going. But what's interesting is that even through all time, I don't recall hearing certain like whispers in the congregation. That's the kid that his wife, I've almost mom's name, had left her husband and he has a son, and hearing little whispers here and there. But as a young kid, I didn't understand what was going on, but no interest. And not looking back now, I'm thinking, what happened to the, take care of the fatherless boys, scripture type of thing. But we'll move along or out.
Yeah. So first of all, so your dad then was never a witness. Is that correct?
My mom told me he studied for a very short time and then decided that wasn't for him. So he was, never a believer, never interested.
Okay. So it started the prototypical divided household type thing, that they would talk about. But I like, the point that you made there, you go to a congregation, it's interesting. Sometimes they'll talk about you more than they'll talk to you.
Yes.
You're the fatherless boy, and they're talking about you and who you are and, oh, that's who he is. But where's the love? Where's the help? Where's the interest in the child? I mean, honestly, from my position now, I'm kind of glad that they weren't interested sometimes in people as much as they should have been, because it helps people wake up. But yeah, it just really goes to show the atmosphere. It's just something I always noticed, even when I was in, just how much people talk about each other and not to each other, and how toxic it is. So growing up with so it's just you and your mom. How was it, going to, let's go to the meetings, talk about that for a minute. Obviously, like you said, they were kind of like, well, here's this kid. But did you enjoy participating at all? Did you like going out in service or giving talks, or were you did you find any friends in the Kingdom Hall?
Well, when we moved to Florida, we lived there for a couple of years, so that was a little longer stay than the other stops we've made. No, I didn't. I don't think there were many young kids in that congregation, so I don't recall hanging out with anyone. There was one girl I remember. I remember giving my first talk, and I wasn't like overly excited about it or anything. And I don't recall being excited to comment or any of those things. Not until later, then when I got a little older, then I really kind of dove in head first. So no, I don't recall really being excited to go into meetings. In fact, when I was younger, I asked my dad when they were still together if I could stay, and he allowed me one time to stay with him, and that was the time my mom went to the assembly or convention and brought back my book of Bible stories book. But from then on, I had to go to meetings with her.
Gotcha. So it was more something you did because that's what you did, because that's what your mom did. It wasn't something
about it. So
what's that?
Ambivalent about it,
Yeah. So okay, you're in this life. You're kind of ambivalent about going to the meetings and such. Did you find any solace in school? When you went to school, did you have any friends there? Or, were you connecting there at all with anybody? Or how was life at school for you?
Um, I was a bit more of a loner as I got into junior high and high school, only because I kept being warned about, don't have close association, they're not really your friends. And as I got in a little more rebellious years, I would sneak some friends over, but then I would get caught and in trouble, and that kind of ended that. So I tried to make some friends, but at the same time, I had a fear. I didn't even really know what the fear was. It was just what was told at the meetings, what was told by my mom, who was indoctrinated, that the world is, you have to be careful of them, they'll hurt you or what have you. So, yeah, so I made some friends, but I was always having to be cautious. And so never developed anything close.
So, just out of curiosity in the moment, where did you as a kid find happiness or joy? Like, did you like to just, were you just a kid? You talked about being alone, or did you just play by yourself a lot? Or did you have kids in the neighborhood? Like, was there anywhere where you felt like you really got to be a kid and just kind of have fun?
Um, hmm, that's a good question. Um, Not much. I pretty much played, myself. I would get a hockey stick and slam some balls against the gate. When my uncle would come over, I have a step uncle who's a year older than me. We'd play wiffle ball in the backyard, and we would go to Jersey City, across Manhattan, to visit my grandmother. And so I would associate with him. But no, that I didn't have a lot of uh, association or playtime with other kids after school. So pretty much on my own there until I got a little older and went over other witnesses' houses.
Okay. All right, well, let's kind of get into that a little bit. So, in your teenage years, how did things kind of progress? Did they, are the teenage years where you ended up getting baptized, giving talks, getting more involved? How did your teenage years kind of play out for you?
So after moving around and finally getting settled back in Long Island, um, because of all the craziness before, finally had some kind of stability for a while. Then my mom had met this worldly guy through family and fell in love with him. He became my stepdad. So during this time period, of course, witnesses would consider my mom spiritually weak because she wasn't going to meetings regularly and service. But after she got involved with my, at that time, soon to be stepdad, he was an alcoholic. So there again, life was crazy at home, volatile through my teenage years, to the point where my stomach was in knots when I would get dropped off at home because I didn't know if there was going to be peace or chaos. So she wound up getting pregnant and disfellowship. And so there was no real encouragement to go to meetings from what I remember. So I took it upon myself and started calling others up to pick me up. What I realized now, looking back on it, was I was really trying to grasp onto anything that was stable. And the religion gave me a kind of pseudo security that I grasped onto and basically learned to be codependent on it. So I jumped in, went to meetings because I got at least a little more acceptance at the Kingdom Hall. And I felt there was something I was supposed to do. So how that started, I guess that's 6 on up. And that's how I started. So I kind of went and did things on my own that way. And of course, mom was proud and others were like, oh, wow, this kid is doing this on his own and so forth. But yeah, I was really trying to grasp onto anything that would give me any kind of sense of control or stability.
Yeah, and I would assume it also got you out of the house.
That it did.
Yeah, so if you have a volatile home again, here's your chance to escape, which is really I mean, it's a good example, honestly, of what a lot of people do when they become Jehovah's Witnesses. A lot of times they're escaping into it. They're escaping something into something that seems very stable and secure, which is very normal. It's just it's what humans do. So, how did things continue? This, it sounds like so you're going to meetings by yourself even a lot. Um, how do things continue to progress for you as a teen?
Well, I asked a friend of mine who was the same age, his older brother, to study with me. And so I did and got baptized around 16. Excuse me. And yeah, what was interesting is even years later, I would have this discussion with my, at that time, wife and said, why did you get baptized? And we would talk about it. And we both agreed it was because we felt that was something we had to do. And especially for a young teen, the expectation is this is just one of the stepping stones that you have to do in order to, which they don't say, um, climb the theocratic, career ladder. And so, yeah, it's amazing how I look back now. I'm like, oh yeah, why did I think that that's was something I had to do? And well, because they kind of outline your life for you, and if you don't go in that direction, then something's wrong with you. You're spiritually weak, or you're in trouble, or so forth. So, yeah, I felt that that was something I needed to do.
I 100% identify. As a kid, even if some people have their parents pressure them. I didn't. It doesn't sound like you really had direct pressure so much. But just the culture, the atmosphere of the organization itself is one of you're either with us or you're against us.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point you're going to have to raise your hand and say, I'm with you. And then they like to bring out the scriptures about, the age of accountability and threaten you and let you know that, you can't skate by Armageddon on your parents' spirituality. At some point you have to take a stand for yourself at some point when you're a kid, of course, or a teenager, which is still a kid. They don't really, we all know the expectation. So of course we're going to get baptized, unless we're the rare person who just doesn't really buy into it, which some really don't buy into it on a level where they're kind of, opposed to it. And, that gets them out earlier. But for a lot of us, yeah, we find ourselves, the waves are going one direction, and instead of swimming upstream, we just kind of go with the current, and that's how we get roped in.
It's funny that you say this too, because what was the other alternative, as you were alluding to too? You go and start climbing the JW ladder, and then you're met with more approval and acceptance and praise. But if you don't, then you're met with scorn faces, or, okay, well, you're not going to associate with my child because you're not, maybe in good standing, or you're not practicing the faith, or what have you. And then you're still stuck in almost a soft shunning situation. So do you, as a young teen, really have any choice if you really want to fit in or connect and be with people? You don't.
No, it's where undue influence comes into place. Mm-hmm. If you only have one choice, do you have a choice? If your choice is either you're with us or you're against us, mm-hmm. and you're not allowed to be anything else, you're not allowed to be yourself in any way. You're either them or those other people over there who are seen as awful. Well, of course you're going to choose to be accepted. What kid doesn't want to be accepted and isn't going to take the path of least resistance? We're all going to do that. Well, most of us are going to do that. Obviously, there's exceptions to every rule, but it's mm-hmm. undue influence. It's not a choice if you don't have a choice. That's so right. You go along with it. Mm-hmm. And then people later say, well, you knew what you were doing. You chose to do this. No, you don't get to take choice away and then claim, well, you had a choice. Mm-hmm. That's unfair.
And that point exactly, as I started waking up and thinking about this, and actually was reading the Bible with new eyes and not with the colored lenses that Watchtower had given me, with Israel, and with making decisions such as what we were saying about getting baptized and continuing in truth. If a gun is pointed at your head, let's say with Israel, and God is saying, well, you know what, you have the blessing here, go ahead and I will bless you and multiply you, and your seed will become like grains of sand. But if you don't, I'm going to kill you. Um, that's not quite a decision. You're putting a gun to my head and telling me, I will kill you and shoot you if you do what I tell you to here. No, a decision would be like, here, you have a choice. You can go there and I'll bless you, or you could just go on your own and live your own life until you die. That's a choice. And I remember bringing that up to someone, and I'm like, and it didn't go over very well, but but that's in a sense what it is. It's not really a choice. It's either, you do this or you die. And of course, if you don't want to die, what are you going to do? You're going to, comply. So
I have to say that's an excellent point. I can't tell you how many times I've seen Jehovah's Witnesses, or actually usually it's people who were never even fully in.
Mhm.
So they don't really know what they're talking about. A lot of times it's people who are witness adjacent or kind of raised around it or whatever. And they'll say things like, well, look, you made that choice. Nobody put a gun to your head. Okay, no, nobody put a gun to my head. They put God to my head.
Mhm.
And they said that God is going to murder me if I don't do what they say. So yeah, they put a God to my head. That's what they did. Congratulations. Like you're exactly right. They did put your life in the balance. So maybe they don't physically put a gun to your head and say, you're going to sign this paper or you're going to, get dunked in this pool of water. But we all know if we don't do this, we're as good as dead to these people.
Mhm.
So we're going to do it. We're going to be dead and shunned today, or we feel like we're going to be dead and murdered by our God at Armageddon. So
Mhm.
yeah, you're going to follow it. What
Mhm.
options do you have?
Right.
Um,
That's right.
so you got baptized at 16. And that's a kind of an interesting age to get baptized because 16, a lot of times, well, I don't know, depending on where you live, sometimes you're starting to get a little more independence. Maybe you can drive and things like that. So what did getting baptized mean for you as a young brother? Because, for a lot of us, we get to or have to pray at a meeting for the first time or handle mics. There's more responsibilities and things that are open to us. What did it mean for you?
Well, again, I guess, well, looking back, it was the natural progression, and what I felt I had to do, because that's what was expected of me. And I didn't really think too far into it, honestly. I remember asking to have the baptismal questions. I went through the 3 parts. Uh, I couldn't remember a lot of scriptures I memorized. The elder said, that's okay. We approve you for getting baptized anyway. My Bible study conductor, though, was not happy about that. He felt I shouldn't have been baptized. Because at this point, I wasn't conforming completely. So in high school, and I would dress a little more not so Christian-like with my ripped jeans, and I mean, I was an art major at one point and photography, so we would just be creative, and people would just draw things all over one kind of pair of jeans I had, and I showed up for my Bible study with their drawings and their signatures and all that, and he'd look me over like I was this, piece of crap, and like, oh, another thing we'll have to talk about on your study, and so I'm kind of an inborn rebel, but I had to really suppress a lot of that to be able to conform. But going from the first time before my mom packed our things and we left, that being a volatile home, going back again to the original home, getting settled, my mom meeting my stepdad, again, it being volatile. I couldn't take any more of the, because he was abusive to my mom and so forth. She had my sister, and after so many years, I couldn't deal with it anymore, so I wound up leaving, which is the shirt on my back that night. Stefan basically chased me over the fence, and I took off. And I went from kind of worse to bad. I moved in with my dad, and so things got a little better. They were a little more, stable. And that's when I started making a little more progress. And so, yeah, I didn't think very far ahead, like having to give prayers. And I knew that because giving talks and everything would make me, nervous, although I did enjoy giving them to an extent. But yeah, my dad, things were a little more flexible with some things. And so like I had wanted to go to college and I knew I could probably get away with it being there, but then I was having this encouragement to pioneer at the same time. So all these things later on kind of crashed together in conflict and made more issues being at my dad's house and with us and him.
Wow. So after you got baptized, all these things became available, and then there's additional pressure being put on you to do things like pray or participate more or whatever the case may be. That you've got you're looking at maybe going to college or pioneering. You see where they really get their hooks into you, because the choices become more serious. They become a lot more decisive, and like it's kind of like, are you going to take a stand for us again or not as you're going down that path? So for you, how did it play out for you after you got baptized and you're going down that road to potential college or pioneering? What was your course of life there?
After I got baptized, I remember auxiliary pioneering for the first time because everyone's saying, "Oh, now you can auxiliary pioneer now that you're baptized," and la la la. And so, that part was, I enjoyed some of it, being out with the friends more and so forth. I was a senior in high school, but graduating, so I was 17, and in Long Island schools, they have it. It's called different things in different places. Here, it's called EVIT. Long Island's called BOCES, where you can go on your junior and senior year to kind of learn a trade, mechanics or cosmetology or culinary, and it's kind of a little pre-course. You get credit for it to bridge over to college and then keep your education going. So one year I took advertising art. I was fairly good drawer. I wanted to do illustrations and so forth. And then the second year I took photography, but it was a 2-year course. So I talked to my dad and I wanted to finish that second year by paying for it after graduation and then go to school for that. And so that was the plan. But then I was getting more and more encouragement and the guilt trip for thinking about going to college. So that was kind of, it felt like a tug of war going on in my body there regarding what to do. So I was going to try to go to college and maybe work part-time. I turned down this job offer, which at that time was paying good money at a bank, and I didn't think my dad would find out about it. But they happened to call the house. Why in the world they called, I don't know. He found out about it and got real angry that I turned down this job, full-time job. And when he asked why, I said, "Well, I wanted to work part-time so I can go out in the ministry more and hopefully go to college." And he was a pretty hard-nosed guy. So he says, "Well, you take that job or you get out." So we never had the greatest relationship to begin with, and often I wasn't at home because I needed a break and peace from him. So I wound up leaving the first time, and just trying to hold on. Yeah, so I was just shy of my 18th birthday when I wound up leaving my dad's house. And the thing that struck me was I had gotten baptized. I had some privileges, quote unquote privileges in the congregation, doing mics and magazines, helping and so forth, and making progress, as they would say. And now my dad kicks me out, and I felt I had nowhere to go. I still didn't feel like connected with anyone there, elders or whatever. I look back and everything was very superficial. And I'm not going to blame, to be all in all fairness, I'm not going to blame everything completely on them. It could have been me because I'm dealing with a lot of stuff myself. But I did want that. So when I got kicked out, I wound up sleeping in my car for 2 nights. I didn't know where to go. Finally, the last Mondays I had, I went and got a motel room so I could shower. And the only thing people I could think of was a couple of friends I had visited from another congregation. They were my age, and I called them up and I said, "Hey, can I crash at your house for a few days?" And sleeping in my car. My dad kicked me out, and he talked with his mom, but his dad was an unbeliever, and so his mom said, yes, but we have to sneak you in because they didn't want his stepdad to find out. So here I am coming late, arriving to the house, getting snuck upstairs, leaving early in the morning to go to work or whatever, and sneaking out. And so I stayed with them for a couple of months before I wound up kind of reconciling some things with my dad and moving back in. But I marvel in a sense, thinking, well, why didn't I contact the elders for help? Why didn't I tell others? And that wasn't a thought in my head, So obviously I didn't feel comfortable enough, or I didn't have enough connections with them to feel like I could even go to them for help with this.
Wow. That does say a lot. And it is indicative of the way a lot of people feel with their elder bodies, that there's no one there that really feels very approachable. They used to have talks a lot on elders and how they should be approachable, because it's just not the case a lot of times. And here you are, you're as vulnerable as it gets, an 18-year-old kid thrown out of his dad's house, living in his car. And yet you don't have that connection with the congregation to be like, and they don't have that connection with you. They haven't worked to create that, which as Jehovah's shepherds, they should be, that's their responsibility to create that kind of environment. And they're not creating it where, an 18-year-old kid even feels comfortable saying, hey, yeah, I'm homeless. Those are the people you should be able to go to. That's just, and I just think too of the pressure then of this 18-year-old kid to sneak around at this house that he doesn't really know, sneaking in and out and everything. And it didn't just last a short while. You said months.
A couple months.
Like it's a lot of intense mental and emotional pressure to keep that under wraps, and to not get caught. It's just, you would rather do that than approach the elders. It's when you put those two side by side, it kind of says something, doesn't it?
And the whole time I never contacted them either.
Yeah. Well, and so then I guess, were you going to the meetings?
I started going to the congregation where I was staying at, to their meetings. And I felt a little more kind of solace because I was, with my friend and his sister there. And they were, supportive, or at least empathetic to what I was going through. But then I spoke with my dad, and he gave his excuses of, that he was bluffing and all this other stuff. And wound up going back home. But less than a year later, I got kicked out again. This time it was for good. So, yeah, the second time I got kicked out, I remember, I don't know who said what to the elders. I didn't contact them, though. So I asked my mom, and she said she didn't believe she did, but she might have spoken to someone who relayed the information. So one elder did call me and said, hey, this other brother has a room to rent, and you can stay there. But that was about most of the help I got. So I went there, couldn't afford it. After 1 week, I wound up moving somewhere else, sharing a house with 5 other guys, which was more affordable. And that was it. I was on my own from then on.
I just wanted to bring up, the reason I'd asked you, did you start going, were you still going to the meetings?
Oh, sorry.
Was that, it just shows again, they weren't seeing you at the meetings. Now you're going for a couple months somewhere else, and they still didn't reach out to you. And then when they do, now you're talking about this next time. Yeah, they've reached out to you with a room for rent that was so expensive you couldn't even stay there. Mm-hmm. Like, what happened to the seeing people naked in clothing, seeing Jesus' brothers naked and clothing them, or, being hospitable and putting them up and all that? I mean, not that you should be allowed to just take advantage, but you were homeless. Mm-hmm. And their brother, where were they? Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice if the brother could have let me stay for a couple of weeks and then say, hey, from here on, I need to charge you, at least so I could get my bearings. But it was just like, here's a room, you pay me weekly, So, yeah.
So how did it go then? So now you're living with five guys, I think you said. So how did things progress from there? Because this whole story it's you see a person who's looking for stability his whole life, in and out of homes, and your parents' relationships and their relationships with you, and now you're in a house with five guys. You're moved on to the next group of people. So where do you go from there?
Yeah, I started going to that congregation where my friends were at, and I found the congregation a little more warm and inviting, and I was able to establish some connections. There was one family that I really appreciated very much, and I would speak with their dad, about various topics, and I was invited over to their family study and felt a little bit more a part of a family for the first time. And so, of course, there was limitations with that, but at this point, I just fully immersed myself in that congregation. So, but after all of this happening, I was getting, I was really disappointed. Of course, I had so many emotions. I didn't know what they were. I was just numb at that point. But I was becoming more and more disillusioned with what was going on, and then the lack of support. And I didn't realize, of course, at the time, I kept grasping onto the religion for stability, and it wasn't really providing that this whole entire time. So therefore, I was getting more, depressed and just struggling with my hurt. And I also had an attraction to men. So I can remember from 6 or 7 years old, I knew I was interested, but I didn't know what that was at that age. And so I was hiding that on top of everything. And so
you said that you had an attraction to men. Is that what you said?
yes, yes. So
It cut out for a second there. I just wanted to make sure that point got made.
yes. So I was hiding that, these attractions or gay feelings that I had, and I didn't tell anyone because I was scared to death. Especially when you hear people talk about, gay persons in a congregation and jest and so forth. So I was really trying to suppress that as well. And so things were getting harder and harder to the point where after I finally got on my own, and even though that congregation was more inviting, now I had all these emotions I didn't know what to deal with. I didn't still feel like I could sit down and talk with anyone about these deep things. I felt I got sympathy, but not real empathy. Oh, the poor, brother, going through a hard time, blah, blah, blah. And it was like kind of like lip service, superficial. I started meeting other JWs that were into drinking and so forth, and I wound up going with that crowd and started drinking a lot and nearly getting in trouble and so on and so forth. So, yeah, because I was still looking for that connection, and they were party people, and it was fun. But eventually, I realized that this was to a place I didn't want to go, drinking heavily and so forth. So I stopped all that and kind of cut off association, lost them. They had, of course, understandably little attitudes, like I snubbed them and I was so self-righteous and this. And I started to get my life back on track. But the thing that hit me is going to a meeting. I visited my mom's congregation, and it was the circuit overseer. So he gave this illustration, and this is at the time that woke me up, and it's not woke me up, but emphasized to me that I need to stop with this crowd because it's a dead end and get back to Jehovah. Right? So he said, Jehovah's like that mother bird, and you're in the nest, and Jehovah will allow the nest to fall out from underneath you, and you to keep falling to the ground. And that symbolizes trying to do things on your own and be independent away from him and so forth. And he'll let you to continue falling until you cry out help. And in the nick of time, Jehovah swoops down like that mother bird and catches you and brings you safely back to the nest. I look back, of course, now, and I have a lot to say about that. But at that point, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm the one who left. It's my fault. I'm not depending on Jehovah. It's all, it's all my fault. I'm not spiritually strong enough. So I have to get my ass. Is this
Oh, you can no, go for it.
I want to make sure I'm not supposed to be cursing on that, but
No, no worries.
and get my act together so that I can get his approval and connected to God again and do things that where I'll be able to get his support. So I did. I started, kind of putting my life together, and at that point, I wanted to pioneer. I mean, I guess I could fast forward to my early 20s. I did for about 5 years. I pioneered a total of 13, and started making, I guess, more progress in their eyes that way. So things started getting a little bit better as I got older because I had a place of my own, and that wasn't changing. And again, just dove right in and basically was checking all the boxes of what they wanted me to do. And yeah.
That's interesting. I like what you said about checking the boxes of all the things that they want you to do. Those boxes provide stability.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially 7 steps to gaining Jehovah's approval or whatever. I mean, they'll always couch it with was it the scripture in, I don't know, it was Malachi or something, and it was like, probably on the day of Jehovah's anger, you will be concealed. Like there's still an out, like, yeah, you're checking off all the boxes, but yeah, you still might die.
Yeah, but it's so uncertain.
Yeah.
And, a lot, in my discussions, that never came up. Yet you internalize it. It's in your brain, in the region of your brain, even though I'm on this perpetual hamster wheel of always doing, pioneering, going on service, working, studying, I still might not make it, even though I'm killing myself trying to offer my best sacrifice to Jehovah. And that kind of fucks with your head,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because what they say then is, are you doing it with a pure heart? And Jehovah reads hearts. And so then they're questioning your motives. So now it's like, yeah, even though you're doing it, yeah, but what are your real motives? There's always, it's never enough. And that's the common refrain of so many, is that they felt like they were never enough, never could be enough. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't be. There is no enough. Which, ironically, it's such a different message than most Christian religions. A lot of Christian religions are kind of more like, Jesus came, there's a sacrifice, it covers over your sins. So like a lot of other religions are kind of more the once saved, always saved, you're cool, this was done for you. But with Jehovah's Witness, it was like, this was done for you. Well, maybe not you. Mm-hmm. maybe not you. Maybe somebody else. Probably not you. But it could be you. But even then, it might not be you. It's like any kind of abusive relationship where you're always kept off balance, so that you always have to look to them for what's good and right, so that you can feel that stability that you were searching for your whole life.
Yeah, so true. And it's, again, you feel like you can never give enough. And the congregation, in my viewpoint now, are just full of codependent people. Mm-hmm. Because this religion in particular, perhaps some others too, they encourage codependency on religion. So you always disregard your needs for the organization's needs or for other people's needs. It's always serving or giving. And it's so unbalanced, because then people burn out, or some who start waking up are resentful. And others just think that, you have to be in pain in order to be your best and to give your best. And then even then, that isn't enough at times. If you make a little goof or something, and it's like, oh, have you been studying enough? Have you been doing this? Have you been in meetings? And you've been preaching enough? That's the solution to everything. Mm-hmm. And so, but one interesting thing around this time too, being out of my dad's house and on my own, since I was still struggling with my sexuality and I was scared to death to tell anyone that, I would try to look up information on the Watchtower indexes and, the brown volumes. We didn't have Watchtower Library yet at that time. No computer or anything. Giving away my age. Well, I said my age already, didn't I?
Too late.
So, yeah, and I remember not finding a lot of information. There were a couple of articles of supposedly like ex-gays that became witnesses and kind of gave their story, and everything was always slanted or in the extreme. Every time there was something. And okay, give you a quick example, which is so ludicrous, is that even running, I wanted to get into running. So here I am, I was 27, 28, 29, and I looked up information because I was a good witness to make sure, you're balanced with everything, something as simple as running. And one of the articles I read shows the tactics that they use. So they'll quote the scripture in Timothy that says that, bodily training is beneficial for little. And so they'll make sure that they emphasize that it's good, but, you got to make sure that you get your studying done, preaching, meetings, and all these other things, which take up all of your time first. And then that can come because it is beneficial for little. But they always put an extreme example in it. So they gave an example and they opened the article with this guy who had to run at least twice a day to get the runner's high. So he'd run in the morning, then he'd run in the evening, and it became like an obsession. I'm like, yeah, some people can be unbalanced, but the majority of people, even that I know now, are not that unbalanced with running. And it was like, they're trying to feed you like, okay, see how this is? So running is not really that good. Okay, Timothy does say we have to admit that, it's beneficial for little, but this can become such a dangerous thing that you have to really be careful. Why can't you just publish a simple story about the benefits of running and leave it alone? How many people are that addicted? But it was, and they do that constantly with other things. They lead with such an extreme example, a negative one, to where you almost don't want to partake or engage in that activity because you're afraid that might happen to you. So you kind of push that aside and you just keep doing more things for them,
I'm so glad you brought that up. I remember when I was waking up, I would point that out to my wife. I was like, it's all hyperbole. All they do is speak in the most extreme situations. Like, who really run? I mean, obviously there are people who can get addicted to the runner's high or whatever, but those are people who probably have other issues and are probably addicted in other ways as well. Mm-hmm. To even bring that up is silly. Mm-hmm. It's not something that the average person is going to have to work on. And it's like every example of a brother who experienced a hardship. Well, of course, eventually he pioneered, became an elder, and then he was a circuit overseer. Like all these people end up going to the highest highs after they, battled such demons within themselves. But not everybody's a circuit overseer or a pioneer. Like, where are the regular normal people in any of their publications? It doesn't exist. Because that's not how to manipulate people. You manipulate people by positioning them against all or nothing thinking so that they think that, well, I'm either nothing and I don't want to be nothing, so I better be all in. So they go to the other extreme.
And that all or nothing thinking permeates everything. Yeah. And I never, of course, realized it being indoctrinated and in it until coming out of it. And I had to work on even my thinking after, kind of deprogramming myself because most of the world is not black or white. There's a lot of gray in there. Even the Bible is. They're making up Pharisaical rules that they're adding to all these things that are making things black and white. So, yeah.
It's interesting that you said the black and white part. I remember my mom once, I was really hard on myself. I was a perfectionist, and I knew that. And I was talking to my mom about it, and she was like, I can't remember what she told me to look up. It might have just been look up cognitive distortions on Google. So I remember I looked it up, and I think there's a Wikipedia article on it, and it listed like one of the top cognitive distortions was black and white thinking. Uh-huh. And I just remember being struck at the moment, it's a cognitive distortion. It's a distorted way of seeing things. Mm. And I just remember as soon as I saw that, I was like, first of all, why did my mom not teach me any of this if she knew this? Second of all, why did she teach me to be black or white about everything? Like that's how Jehovah's Witnesses are. Everything is either right or wrong. It's righteous or it's wicked. The terms they use. So there is no room in the middle. And so it's interesting when one of the things I do when I work with people as a coach is I talk about how I try to be a healthy mirror for people, because it's like we were raised in a fun house. It was a not so fun house, but with those fun house mirrors that are all curved, like we were given a distorted way of seeing ourselves, and literally everything around us was seen through this distorted mirror. And so I try to be, a more straight up and down, nice mirror that shows you in a healthy way, here's who you are. Because we were shown our entire lives all or nothing, hyperbolic examples of things, and it really distorts how you see everything.
And, and of course, now I can see this. That thinking is really important, because when I started fading and all the doubts that I suppressed and all the questions I had started coming up, and I finally got the courage to look at those things, I realized, and read the Bible with fresh eyes, I realized that this all or nothing thinking, either good or bad, God is either good or bad, and of course he's not bad, so he must be all good. That's not the case. I remember reading and I'm going, oh my God, God killed a lot of babies. The flood, right? Egypt, even the Bible storybook shows a picture of what looks like a 12-year-old or a young teen, the mother holding him being dead. Teen, even in the Bible storybook for kids, right? When Joshua was leading and taking over Canaan to the promised land there's explicit scripture that said, oh, well, keep the virgins for yourselves, but everyone else devote to destruction. And babies, toddlers, children, teens were killed multiple times by God. So if you don't have that all or nothing thinking, you may start thinking, well, is God really all good? Is he all fair? Because you know what? Justice, being a God of justice or fairness, he would at least at the minimum put a sign there, since Israel was in Babylon for so many years, right? Oh, by the way, this land is reserved for Israel. Enter and settle at own risk. That would have been fair, to give them a head's warning, but not to say nothing, have them settle there. Years have several generations of their family there, and then being told, okay, you got to get out. You're gonna die, pretty much. So all of these things, without that, you may start wondering. But if you have that all or nothing thinking, indoctrinated in everything, God can't be bad because he's so good. So I don't understand something, or you suppress that, or their famous line is, leave it in Jehovah's hands, and in time he'll correct things. So you have to have that. You keep thinking God is all good when in fact that ain't so.
No, not in his own book. It doesn't portray him as all good if you look at it with an open mind. So for yourself, obviously you kind of mentioned the fading, but how did things play out when you went? So you're a pioneer. So now you're doing well as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. In all, that's how they would perceive you. How do you continue to progress? I think you mentioned you were an elder at one point, right? Mm-hmm. So how did things continue to progress, and then progress in a different way?
Well, to finish off that part, as a teen and doing research on homosexuality.
Oh, that's right.
I'm sorry, I didn't finish wrapping that part up. I just remember from the couple articles that they had, and then the response from readers, what I took away from that was, especially when one reader responded to that Awake article, was I think he said, quote unquote, I now recognize the need for a marriage mate. And I've heard from other people stories of like a brother that was gay who was on the assembly and gave his story, and the same conclusion was there. And so the impression that was left on me is that, wow, okay, so I am trying to, do more studying. I'm trying to be out in service more, pioneering and meetings and doing all these things to keep myself so distracted and busy from my struggle here. And the solution seems, okay, you get married. So once you experience intimacy, you're having sex with a wife, I guess this problem kind of goes away, or it's just a phase, as the Young People Ask article brings out. And the solution was always do more. So as I started progressing, I was involved in the sign language field, learned at a young age, and had been in sign language most of my adult life. I did meet my wife, and people ask, well, did you love her? I'm like, yes, I did love her. But thought that was a necessary step also in order to keep me on the straight and narrow. So we wound up getting married. So I pioneered 5 years before that, got married, wound up moving out of New York into Maryland, and things were going really well. I was a ministerial servant, and things took a downward turn because of a family member from my wife. Basically, he's a narcissistic psycho, and I can go on and on about the things that he's done to try to ruin my reputation and basically get me out. Long story. So because of that, we wind up moving out of that congregation, and it was our goal always start a sign language group and have it form into a congregation. That's what we wanted to do. We postponed having kids because this was a goal, and at that time we were younger. And so we moved to the Eastern Shore of Maryland, started a group. I went to the, I forget what it's called now, the classes they had to help you know how to teach a foreign language by Cotton, the guy who was leading it. So got trained from the society, along with many other brothers that were there from all different languages. Came back, taught that class. My wife was my assistant. She's deaf, so she was a good authority regarding the language, being a native user. And but that family member kept acting from time to time, and long story short, we got settled in one congregation to where I got appointed an elder. So I was appointed an elder, then started regular pioneering again. My wife did too at that time. And so that's what really helped me wake up a little more. I saw so much more what was going on and behind the scenes with brothers and sisters and their problems and their issues. And being a new elder, you got your secret elder's handbook, which no one is allowed to read. You're not even supposed to leave it out on display when you're not around. And reading that, and I was a very studious person, so reading that and reading the letters that were sent to elders in the file cabinet and trying to be the best elder, I was really hit kind of hard with some things, because there'd be an elder that's 20 plus years experience, and I felt like I almost had to police him, because I noticed that they would use scriptures and kind of bend them to fit in a secret agenda that they had. Or there'd be scriptural wars. So one brother would say this scripture, and then another would refute it and contradict it with another scripture, and I'd be sitting there going, what the hell is going on, And so little things like that started waking me up. I can go on more about the specific things that did, but I don't know if you want to.
Well, so this was in the ASL congregation, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would be interesting to know kind of some of the other things that you saw, especially, because I think as a former elder, you have a unique perspective, because you did get to see some things behind the scenes at times that others didn't, or may not have. I know myself, I would tell my wife, every time I get closer to rising in the organization in any way, being appointed as something, I end up seeing things that disappoint me greatly, and getting discouraged and being like, yeah, I'm not sure I want to see the man behind the curtain. Like I always felt like the higher I got, not that I got that high, but just the more people entrusted me with things, even elders would just tell me things. And the more I got to know people, and what was really going on, it always disturbed me
Mhm.
because it wasn't what I was told it was. So what were some of those things that helped you wake up?
Well, after I became an elder, and even before this, I've always been a bit, extrovert, gregarious type of person. So I like connecting with people and talking and having fun. And so, being 19 when I started learning sign language for the first time, and being in it for quite a while, and then having deaf family, it came a little more naturally. So, um, a lot of people liked that part of my personality. They thought it was funny, and people enjoyed my talks. And I was a people person, so people felt they can connect with me more, with things, and they would talk about their problems and so on and so forth. So that caused some jealousy, which I didn't understand at the time, but jealousy regarding either skill or just attention being not as much given to that particular elder or them. And so that caused some rifts. But some of the things, for me, being an elder, that um, started helping me wake up was, for example, one call. I remember one elder, who I thought was a buddy of mine. He says, I think we were at an elders meeting, and one elder was stating that one sister had told him that she was molested, and everyone was kind of like in a almost panic. Like, okay, well, we got to call the society right away. And I was a new elder at that time. I'm like, what's everyone all, going nuts about? And right away, because he goes, okay, Ryan, let's you and I call the legal department and then take care of that. And I didn't know the procedure yet. I went and read the letters afterward from 1996, I think it was. And then since then, they've replaced that letter 2 or 3 times with new information. But I didn't quite get the emergency that was going on until later, of course. So me and another elder had to call um, the society, specifically the legal department, and he did all the talking, but we had to both be on it because you need 2 witnesses. And of course, on their end, there are 2 elders listening as well, something I had learned. And so they asked a gazillion questions, but they wanted to verify information first. And again, I didn't understand why, because they can just congregation number comes up on their computer, the address of the Kingdom Hall, what state we're in, what town we're in. But they verify all that information. What state were you calling from, and you're in this town, yes, and so forth. And after the other elder explained the whole situation to them, we then were put on hold. I guess he was consulting with another elder or so forth, came back and gave us further instructions of what to do. But one of the things he said was, and this is not something you need to report. And of course, now I understand why they were verifying all that information. They were trying to see whether Maryland was a mandatory reporting state. And again, I didn't get it at that time. I just thought this was procedure. But it really struck me later how they were in this kind of almost like, tizzy there, because they had to quickly call and you couldn't delay. And I'm like, oh, this is because there's all these lawsuits that I didn't know about, and it appeared that no other elder knew about them, which I would find out later. At that time, I had no knowledge of it. But that was one of the things that
Yeah.
started making me raise an eyebrow, like, what is going on?
Yeah, and it wasn't about the sister. What happened to the sister? Like, here's a hurting person. Why are we not talking to her? Why are we calling legal? Why, you know what I'm saying? Like,
That's the first thing you're supposed to do.
it's
Call.
absurd.
Yeah, yeah.
They're a corporation. That's what they are. They're a corporation first.
One of the other 2 big things for me was my wife was molested by that cousin who was giving me grief. And that finally came out because she has a couple of cousins, and they both did molest her. And she had told me about one cousin. He's not a witness. And years later, she brought out that this cousin did too. And so after all the tax and so forth, and now being an elder, reading the letters and knowing the two witness rule, I was encouraging her to bring it to the elders, right? And I explained it this way. I said, if you bring it up to them and it gets on record, even though the statute of limitations, there's nothing can be done because this is years and years ago in New York. If another sister or brother complains and says, if another brother or sister makes a complaint that says that this particular now elder also molested them, then that's considered two witnesses according to J.W. Warp theology, and then they can take action. So I was encouraging her, please do that for the sake of other kids. Maybe there is already another complaint that that's nothing's being done about it because they need a second person. So she decided to do it, and bravo to her for having the courage, to be able to do that. But it was this formalistic thing that caused a lot of hurt for her. So the first thing was, again, they had to call Bethel legal department and so forth to contact the other congregation where he was, one who molested her was in. And then they told me, because I'm the head, so I'm supposed to pass this on to my wife, that she has to write a letter detailing what happened to her and what was done. And I looked at them, I said, is this absolutely necessary? And they said, yeah, we can't proceed at all with the investigation without it. And I'm like, I said, do you realize what this is going to do to her, though? She's writing all this stuff out. She's going to have to relive what happened to her. We thought this was going to be a simple, hey, boom, we can give you like a summary. But you want her to go into specific acts and things and detail that. That's going to be extremely hard. And it was, poor woman. She just kind of tanked for a while, having to go live through that and write it. And I'm here trying to help her write it. And I said, just tell me the story. I'll write it down. And it was extremely hard. And because the family member that did molest her, he's narcissistic, amazing manipulator. I've never seen anyone so premeditative before. It's almost scary. It's like psycho scary. I warned the elders. I said, look, I told you my history with him. He will, if you're not careful, spin you around and you don't know which way is up. He will change questions and twist them to put it back on you. I'm trying to give them tips. I said, I've dealt with him before, and gave all these other things to watch out for. So they go to the congregation, meet with him, and they come back. And of course, there's nothing that can be done because he says he didn't do it. And they explained some of the stuff that happened. And I said, you guys he played you. And of course, they didn't like that. I said, I warned you about this and this and this. And you didn't get to the heart of really what it was. Had you asked certain questions, as I kind of suggested, you would have been able to kind of decipher and weed through all of his smoke, sending up their smoke and be able to kind of really pinpoint. So it was hard. So she was going through a really rough time. This was back in 2012. So I was an elder, and what that did, it triggered me to relive other bunch of crap growing up myself that I hadn't really dealt with, especially, from going from home to home and then being kicked out and a lot of that garbage. So now both of us were struggling, and what occurred after just boggles my mind. So here we have a group of elders, right? Of course, I think my friends, and some I've hung out more with others. And I was going through a rough time. she was going through her time. We were struggling with depression. I was missing more meetings. And my brother-in-law had called and said, look, my sister-in-law is going through surgery. They have a couple of kids. Can you help us out? Because she's not going to be able to. And they lived about, I think it was 4 or 5 hours away. And it was the same time that I was scheduled to have an elders meeting before the circuit overseer would visit. And so they don't ask for much. So I said, of course, we'll be there. They don't ask. And so it's obviously something that they needed help with. So along with missing meetings and then missing that elders meeting, which is they kind of pinned me to the wall for, even after I explained why we were there, they had this whole entire discussion. Now, this is a period of months, of course. I'm kind of condensing it, where they wrote this letter to the society, and they said they wanted to review my qualifications as an elder. So, of course, they never even told me that. So here goes now the next, about 6 months. Before that, again, you have to meet as an elder body, because the circuit overseer will tell you what things the elder body needs to work on, what things that counsel you give the congregation, and he's going to check up on you. Did you give a talk regarding what needed to be done? Have you visited, Sally so and so because she's inactive, or did you take care of this problem? So they can be accountable. So now the time period is ready soon for the next CO visit, and so I said, brothers, I need the letter that you guys talked about so I can review that and be prepared for the next elders meeting. So 2 elders stopped by, all formally in a suit and everything, and they handed me a sealed envelope with it in there. We talked a little bit, and again, I wasn't as regular in meetings because of struggling with depression and all, and lack of support is really what it was. They give it to me. I read it the next day, and I burst out crying because I read it and we were talked about in there. And so if others don't know, what happens, a report gets typed up and gets the CEO will type out a letter and report, and will get sent to the society. And in that explains situations or problems so that the society is aware of, so they can address it maybe in a future Watchtower article or something like that. So when I read it, I was shocked. And the slant that they had put in it looked like I wasn't cooperative, like I didn't want to meet with them for shepherding calls. And it just got me so upset, because I'm like, yeah, you guys call me the day of for a shepherding call that night or the day before. And I told them, my commute back home was 2.5 hours. By the time I get home, I'm exhausted. And so if we have a shepherding call tonight, I'm not going to be the most receptive and be able to absorb the information you're trying to tell me. Better on the weekends and all. But everything was last minute, and the way they had it slanted was like I was refusing to be cooperative to meet with them. And then they were writing uncertain of what, like, basically to do. But yeah, so that elders meeting now that I was prepared for and go to, I figured it out, which was unfair. They should have told me that, yes, we're going to be talking about you and reviewing your qualification as an elder. They fucking came to my house, handed it to me, and they could have said something, but they didn't. Get to the elders meeting, and now I'm just like distraught over what's going on with my wife. Also, we had a deaf girl was in her teens now that we kind of adopted, quote unquote. My wife spent a lot of time with her. She looked up to her because my wife at that time was deaf, and we kind of looked out for her and all. And in that, her stepdad had molested her. That's another story in itself. So I was crushed with that because this poor girl was hurting. My wife was hurting. Now I'm dealing with my shit. It was just a perfect storm for craziness. So I get to the meeting, and we open up, and first question is, I said, are my qualifications being reviewed tonight? One elder said no, and then another elder quickly interrupted and said, well, not yet. So then I had to sit there as we talked about all these other issues, and then me last. And the question that was posed to me when it came to talking to me was, why are you missing so many meetings? I sat back and I said, I couldn't help but answer it with a question. I said, why do you think? I said, according to this report, all of you are aware of what my wife and I are going through. And if you don't know, all you had to do was ask. If I'm missing meetings, all you had to do is pull me to the side, sit down with me as a friend would. Hey, what's going on? We heard a little bit of this, but we want to know what's more going on with you. So I explained all the crap all over again. And then they dismissed me, just like a judicial committee almost, right? 40 minutes agonizing, wondering what the hell are they going to do? Are they going to remove me as an elder? And why would they remove me? Why aren't they helping me more than going through this topic and assisting me and my wife and inviting us over for family study, inviting us, they would do one thing after I faded. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, which irritated me, is they would stop by while on service. Okay, well, because I lived about half hour from the hall, they would be doing return visits or territory, and then they would stop by to see how we were doing. And I'm like, so when it's convenient for you and you can count the time, because most likely they were counting the time,
Of course
and
they
it
would.
benefits you, you'll stop by, but not when it's on your own time. You can't drive a half hour, even to spend a half hour with me or to come visit on your own time. Yeah, that makes me feel worse, like shit, And I felt like we were inconvenienced, and only if you were getting something would you be willing to be helpful or supportive. But phone works. You can simply do that if you can't drive all the way over here, Anyway, I digress. So 40 minutes later, I'm back in there, and they go through their spiel, and just kind of like a judicial committee, a couple elders, 2 or 3, will go through different sections of one. They're going to try to counsel me lightly about missing meetings and encourage me to be there, and what are things that I can do to get spiritually on track. So I had to live through that, but that point was a real turning part for me. And I remember reaching out to one circuit overseer. We had a decent friendship, so I thought. This is actually right after or before. I have to think about that. But I reached out to him, and I saved the email that I sent him and everything. I'm so grateful I did, so I can review what I said. And this is how it went, okay? So I wound up texting him first. I know that he was abused growing up. He gave this crazy story that I think it was his real dad, I don't recall, or stepdad, JW, in the truth, who tried to kill him. I don't know much detail. And he also said that at one time he was so depressed, living with his roommates, that he was in a closet, and that's where they found him, okay? So I'm like, this guy can understand what I'm going through with all this craziness. So I text him, and he said, okay, call me. And he goes, I was thinking about you just at the moment you had texted me wanting to talk. It must be Jehovah, directing us. Okay, remember that part. So as I am explaining all this things, I'm angry of how my wife's being treated, how I've been treated, and other things that were going on. And nowhere in near rage, but he, I guess, was a bit more sensitive to me being angry and explaining, saying, I don't understand this, and why aren't they being supported by my ex, and so forth. And he said, you're in a rage. He goes, I've seen this with other brothers. Have you done something that will be grieving Jehovah's spirit on you? And I felt like I just got jabbed in the face 5 times. I'm like, no, I haven't done anything to grieve his spirit. He goes, because you're such in a rage. And I've seen this where brothers, I know Jehovah's spirit is like withdrawing away from them, and they're one step for messing up and doing stuff. And that crushed me, beyond words. So I'm going to bring that letter up.
While you're doing that, I just want to say it's really it just really shows who they are. In the end, it's always your fault.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what happens, it's your fault.
Mm-hmm.
They don't ever own anything. Here's an opportunity for the circuit overseer to say, yeah, maybe some of this stuff, but no, did you do something that grieved Jehovah's Holy Spirit and all this other stuff? It has to be you. It can never be them. It's never.
Yeah, it's so abusive,
It's very abusive.
And so after I hung up, of
Mm-hmm.
course, at the end, I'm supposed to be real appreciative that I was able to talk with him and so forth. I thought about it. I wound up writing an email to him because I said, this feels off. This is something not right about it. And so I wrote down, I was right before I started therapy for myself. So I went into years of therapy to help with my situation. I wrote this. And I'm so happy I saved it. So I wrote and said, the conversation didn't feel right after. That's when I sent him the article that talked about abuse, anger, and even rage. So I quoted from the publications. And I said, since he was abused, I thought of all people, he would get it and could empathize. After that email, I never heard from him ever again, even though we would text from time to time prior to that. Hey, how you doing? This and that. Where you're serving now, what congregation you're at, what state. And so the email, where did it go? I'm sorry. Here you go. I said, hey, CO, I'm not going to state his name. I hope you and your wife are doing well. Last time I texted you were in circuit overseer school, and I just wanted to follow up from our last phone conversation. You were pretty busy. I was hoping that we could talk again. I said, I did appreciate the talk on the phone back in December. I was feeling really low at that time and reached out because I thought that of all people, you would understand. After we hung up, I burst out crying. It was the first time I ever really cried. And I wound up thanking him. It's like thanking your abuser, Mm-hmm. I said, thank you. I did, though, want to express some of my feelings about some of the things you said on the phone. I was upset, felt worse than crap, but please don't assume I did something wrong just because your experience in the past with other brothers has been that way. I appreciate your candor and straightforwardness. I don't mind that. I don't always read between the lines very well and get tired of the hearing way of beating around the bush. But is Jehovah's Spirit really not with me because I'm experiencing anger or even rage? The publications state this. So I quoted the 91 Awake, October, and it said that long suppressed childhood rage may now come tumbling forth. It's, righteous rage, normal, and start doing that. So then I kind of flipped on him. I said, does that mean that you were going through such a bad depression where you were hiding in your closet that you didn't have Jehovah's Spirit on you? Because if you did, you wouldn't have been that depressed. You should have had the joy of Jehovah. And I said, does that mean you were doing something wrong for Jehovah's Spirit to be removed from you? I said, so please be careful when stating these things, especially if you'll be helping the next brother and sister who is going through something like this. And then they say, I appreciate your help talking on the phone. Hope we can see you before Armageddon. I hope you guys are okay and pray Jehovah's blessing on you. We miss you both. And so I followed up 4 years later, just in my little notes, never replied to that email. I double checked to make sure it was sent to the right email address because the elders all have the same email address to contact him. Same email. And so no reply. And that was one of the biggest hurts because, again, we had a friendship going even before that where he told me some things that were like not good for people to know about a circuit overseer that could get in probably a little trouble, just human things, drinking too much and things like, little things like that he felt comfortable enough to tell me. And so that's why it hurt even more when he put it on me like I did something wrong. And then I said at the end, so which is it? Was Jehovah leading me to call? because that's what he said. But then if Jehovah's Spirit wasn't on me, how could he be leading me to call him at the right time? Yet it wasn't him who initiated the contact. You see, I'm the one who initiated contact. And they'll say, well, it must be Jehovah. Well, okay. Wouldn't it be better if, and more proof that it was Jehovah, if you were the one who thought of me and then called for no reason, you know?
Ryan, come on. You're thinking about this. You can't, no, you don't think about it. You just accept that whatever they say is from God. That's all. And just flip the switch and shut the rest off. Just accept what he said. It's your fault, and that's all there is to it.
Conclusion is that things work out, it's always Jehovah's blessing or intervention. When they don't, it's either your fault or it's the devil's fault or the world or something like that. So, yeah.
It's a shame. And likely, this circuit overseer, he's a human, and he probably found you easy to be vulnerable with and to talk to, and he was sharing things with you because he probably has things he wants to share. But when it comes down to it, most of Jehovah's Witnesses, you mentioned narcissism earlier, the organization itself and the people in it, they kind of view other people as objects. Sometimes you're an object to dump their own emotions on. Sometimes you're an object that is just a problem and you're there to be fixed. And in this case, Ryan was just a problem to be fixed. You were coming with issues. They're not interested in spending the time. They don't have the emotional capacity and the empathy to get in there with you and really find out what makes you tick and what you care about and what's really going on in your heart. That's why I think that's one of the reasons they just say, only Jehovah can read hearts. That absolves them of any responsibility to see you as human whatsoever. You're just a person who's causing a problem. And we have this checklist here. And if you would just act right and follow this checklist, you could continue being an elder and everything is good. But they don't. It's all about crime and punishment. It's all about performance. It's not about, it's like a job. Here's your performance review. It has nothing to do with who you are or how you hurt or what your wife's going through. They don't care. They don't have to see you as human. You're just a problem. And if it isn't you, it's next man up.
And then the solution to everything is we got to take care of the spirituality first. So their answer is throw them a scripture or get them out in service more or get them to make sure their family studies regular or their personal studies regular. They forget the human part of people where people need connection. People need a hug. People need that to heal what's going on with them. And then then spirituality can progress. But if you just keep putting the spirituality part, it doesn't always work.
But what is spirituality without spirit? The human spirit. Your spirit is part of this too. It's something that's spiritual. It's something, there's a connection there. And so their definition of spirituality is just this cold, again, are you ticking the boxes? Are you performing? That's how they view spirituality. Are you going to the meetings? Are you knocking on doors enough or whatever? It's not about who you are. I remember asking when I stepped down as a ministerial servant at 20 or whatever I was at the time, I remember asking the elders, I was like, look, when you appointed me a ministerial servant, what made that decision for you? You don't know me. Mm-hmm. You never asked me what my study is like or how connected to Jehovah I am or any of that. Why in the world did you appoint me? What was it? And they're like, well, you were going out in service X amount of hours. You were a pioneer. You were reaching out. You were doing the things in the Kingdom Hall. Their version of spirituality is merely performance of duties in the Kingdom Hall. It has nothing to do with spirit, whether it be God's or yours or anything. It's just, are you ticking the boxes and doing the things, and can we count on you? That's it.
Those boxes, they look at Timothy and Titus. If you reasonably meet them, then you can get appointed. They don't know.
I mean, my dad was emotionally abusive as could be, and the elders knew about it. I was in so many meetings as a kid because there were these issues between my mom and dad, and the elders knew who my dad was. I told them. My mom told them. Didn't matter. He didn't match any of these qualifications. A lot of the ones in Timothy, they didn't care. He did their bidding. That's what they wanted. They wanted someone who was a yes man, who would do the things that they needed done, and he presented well in the congregation. That was it. There was
And
they didn't care who he was.
I'm sorry that you had to go through that. It's sickening.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad, and then but also, I mean, let's also humanize elders. You were an elder, and here you were. You're dealing with this thing. A lot of times, I think because a lot of people have been through a lot in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community, we have a tendency to demonize elders. But let's do hashtag not all elders. Because not all elders are that way, and not all elders had that personality. Elders are humans too. And here you were, you're just a hurting person, and you're reaching out for help even with your fellow elders, because a lot of people say, oh, it's an elders club, a boys club, and blah blah blah. Sure, there's some element of that to it, but still, it's just like misogyny. Misogyny is only good for the people who rule it at the top. Men get impacted by misogyny too. We get hurt by the people who are misogynistic as well. And just like that club and the boys club and the elders, not all elders escape unscathed. You were hurting and you were reaching out for help. And here's your boys. Here's the all boys club, and the misogyny didn't help you any. Nobody was there to help you when you needed it. And it's just a shame. I guess I'm just saying this to say, elders are people too. and although there are some really narcissistic, horrible, misogynistic, awful ones, not all elders are or were. And you were just a hurting person. You were trying to help your wife. You've got your own issues. You're trying to help the congregation in ways. And all of that goes unnoticed simply because you're not ticking certain boxes and being at the meeting. It's not even so much a lot of times about misogyny. It's just like this, I don't know what you would call it. It's just the organization. The organization has standards. Okay. And it's a corporation, and it's a cult. And it's just this big thing that sucks in everybody, and including even elders at times, and they're just as much a victim of it as anyone else. And it's just a shame. I'm sorry to hear it, because I know how much it must have hurt to even be in the club. And still they're blind to you, as a person.
I'm glad you balance that out too, because there are some elders that have much more empathy and really want to help the brothers and sisters there. And after I had my qualifications reviewed and so on and so forth, and there were times where they tried, but everything was just, here's a scripture. There was no, you're going through such a hard time. Like what the articles say they should do, what the elder book says they should do. And I've even asked them point blank before one shepherding call. I said, here are a couple of articles that discuss what we're going through. I really would appreciate it if you would read them over before meeting with us. And still, so unfortunately, I didn't have those exceptional elders in the congregation with me at that time. And I look back and I get it. They could have been maxed out or limited, because you know what? We had quite a few. I think we had 3 other elder pioneers. And when you're an elder and a pioneer, you are so freaking busy. Mm-hmm. You don't have time to piss. So when you're in that, your focus is making your time or getting that talk done for the next, or having a judicial committee or something. And you know what? Here's a couple of scriptures. You'll be fine. Be on your way. And because of time, mm-hmm.
And mental and emotional energy, because I get sucked away.
And I told one elder one time, I said, if I was a return visit or a Bible study, I would have so much more attention because you can count the time. You'd be over here buying me groceries. You'd be over here checking on me, how I'm doing. And I said, why is it that we love bomb them, do all these things to get them in, and after that, they're kind of like on their own? I said, where's the internal ministry, the focus there? We keep focusing on bringing people in, but what happens to the people inside already if they're not taken care of properly? So, but all on deaf
I
ears.
completely agree. I used to say the same thing. We're spending all this time trying to bring people in, but they're walking out the back door because nobody cares that they're here. After they get here, what in the world are we doing? It's ridiculous, but it's just, again, it's the hamster wheel, and everybody's trying to perform, and they're trying to run their reps. That's it. And it's not about people, and it's not about where's the love and all that. So where does this go for you after talking to the circuit overseer? You're disappointed, and this elders meeting has gone so poorly. Where does life take you?
Well, I was to the point where I resigned being an elder and a pioneer too. And I told them, I wrote a letter, just said, right now I need to focus on my family, because if you say that you have to focus on your family, then it doesn't look bad on you. Because as a head of a household, as the lead of my family, right, if I don't focus and make sure they're okay, as the scripture says, then you're worse than the person without faith. So I put that in my letter. I was really careful how I worded it, and didn't talk to any of them. Dropped my elder book and the letter on the table, said, hey, go into the conference room. I left something there for you. And they were dumbfounded by it, right? I'm like, why would you be dumbfounded? So after that point, before that, I already started mentally like fading, because all these things were, happening. I wasn't studying this, and I didn't want to. And struggling more now with all the stress with my sexuality, I'm like, at this point, I'm thinking, what do I do? Part of it is this, and I can't talk to anyone about it, because I've seen how one brother in the congregation who got reproved with another brother, how they treated him and how they talked about him behind his back with me present. And I'm saying, there's no way in hell I'm ever going to talk to these brothers. I wanted to at one point, I can't. Look how they make fun of, make light of, and make it like they're ew, gross. Okay, so if I tell you I'm going to be vulnerable, I'm going to be upset, and be emotional, and yeah, I'll probably need a hug for that. But if you're going to look at me like, ew, you've got a disease or something, that's not really going to help for this. So I, last ditch effort, I Googled, help with homosexuality, and I found this conversion therapy group. Now, there's all different types that are horrible that I've heard about, from electric shock therapy to all these other things in the past, right? Now, mine wasn't like that. And at this point, the group I went with was a weekend. They were very careful as to not word it like this was a cure. And they made it non-denominational, and they were offering another solution than going into the gay lifestyle, as they call it. And so I did benefit a little bit from it, because they talked about emotions being pent up and getting that out and the shame of it all. And that was the first time I ever said in a group of guys that went from 18 to 60 that I have these attractions that, I'm gay. And they never would say gay. They would call it same-sex attraction, SSA. So I left that weekend feeling a little more hope, and they would have like weekly groups to get together. And I did that. I went another step further in their process. And what it really boils down to is still the fact that you're broken. And it's more of a distracting game. Yeah, it's about trying to heal your past, if you have trauma and emotions, this and that. And I did a lot of therapy afterward to help with that. But it's a distraction game. So it's like being a JW. So you study more, you go on service to, drop dead from exhaustion, and you do all these things to distract you from an issue really you should be dealing with emotionally or what have you. And so after a few years in that, which I'll get to, I couldn't play the game anymore. So I did the conversion therapy. And then since I had faded, I was able to think more on the doubts that I had that I suppressed before. And so some of the things that of more late was the first annual meeting. So they had, I don't know if you were there at that time, but first annual meeting and the congregations, right? To
Tell me
hear
more.
Tony Tight Pants. Okay. This man, okay, now I've heard from other Bethelites in the 80s when the style was tight pants again, that they had to be careful your jeans aren't too tight, if you're a Bethelite, and they blamed it on homosexuals then. And here I go, I'm sitting there because I was missing a ton of meetings, but I showed up for that one. And here he goes on his rant about tight pants, and it's the homosexuals, they want to see you. Like, I went home with that point and others, but thinking, okay, Tony. So I say, Tony, back in the 80s, that was the right. So you warned about that and blamed it on the homosexuals and the fashion who want to see your figure and want to see your bulge or whatever. But then we went through quite a few years of the real baggy style. Did all the homosexuals get fired, or did they quit the fashion industry?
The pleated pants that looked like when you sat down, looked like you had a balloon in your pants. That's a good point. Where did the homosexual designers go then? That's a really good point.
I was so angry at that, and because he has a thing, and honestly, I think Tony Tight Pants is fighting a feeling. I think he has those feelings, and he's projecting his bullshit onto everyone because that's his issue that he's been struggling for all these years. So I was super angry about that. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So now they're rehired back at this time now to make all these tight-fitting clothing. And the yoga pants for sisters during the annual meeting, they talked about that. I looked at my wife, I go, I was struggling not to roll my eyes. I'm like, okay, what is this supposed to use when they exercise? Okay, so they could wear shorts. Okay, but you know what? When they go to the freaking beach, even in a one piece, I see a lot more skin than that. Let it go, for Christ's sake. It's. I felt after that meeting that they were pushing their cons of what is modest on other countries, like Europe, for example. You've seen old videos, United video where in Russia and in other countries where they have these long lines of baptism, and their guys are all in their Speedos. The girls are in their bathing suit with no T-shirt on top of that. And this is a normal thing for them. Nudity is not such a big deal in Europe compared to here. So I was thinking, how dare you? Now you're pushing what you feel is modest, but what is that? That is a cultural thing. Modest depends on the culture. In Africa, in some countries, go around topless, where they're feeding their babies and walk around like that. And because I've heard missionaries tell me stories about it. So I'm like, if that were the case, they all should be marked and reproved or something, because that is certainly immodest if you're exposing your breasts, right? I'm like, who gave you the nerve forcing your conscience and what you feel is modest on other cultures who are okay with that? And I told my ex-wife, I said, you wear yoga pants anytime you want. I said, this is pharisaical. They're making rules that are not in there. And it seems like the last several years, they've gotten more into making rules. Mm-hmm. And I brought that question up one time to an elder. So we're just finished an elders meeting. And I said, this is when I was about to quit being an elder, resign. And I said, so all these things you're saying are suggestions. He goes, yes, they're suggestions from the society. And I said, oh, or guidelines, right? And yeah, I said, but if that means I don't have to do it, right? And he goes, I said, it's a suggestion. We don't make rules. They're real. This group was sensitive about, we can't make rules or anything because that's not Jehovah's way. And I said, okay, so for example, what he was talking about, if I don't do that, what will happen? And he did want to answer it. He's hemming and hawing this and that. And so I said, well, there'll be repercussions, wouldn't there be? I'll be looked upon as not cooperating with the body. Be looked upon as not cooperating or obeying the body, right? But it's called a suggestion. So really, it's not a suggestion. It's a rule. I have to follow this, or we all do. If not, there are consequences. I said, and so he didn't like that. But I'm like, it's not a suggestion. So let's just cut the crap and say it for what it is. But, it can't appear like that. Everything's appearance of JWs. So,
Yep, absolutely. Again, they just suggest that you get baptized when you're young. They don't make a rule that you have to. It's the same thing. It's just played out as adults. But I'm with you. That annual meeting. I walked away so disappointed because it was like, here's the first time we're kind of seeing the governing body on display. Mm-hmm. They have the attention of millions of brothers and sisters around the world. And we're talking about tight pants and yoga pants. And I think, was it crazy socks? Like colorful socks?
Yeah. And he made it out like it was this awful negative thing, like who would want to wear these crazy. I relished in that because I had to wear a conservative suit and I could wear a somewhat flashy tie, and I relished in wearing crazy socks because I had some control over my clothing.
Well, because you love Satan.
That's right. Devil's child.
Really? Is this the dumbest thing? But here you have the attention of everyone in the world. You can say anything you want to encourage brothers and sisters to show them love, whatever. And it's a rant about clothing. Just a dumb old man who's angry, and out of touch. What did they say? Oh, okay, boomer, or whatever today. He was just mad and out of touch, and he just wanted to yell at somebody, so he did. Mm-hmm. And if that seems to be his style and his personality, but, he could have shown love to people. He could have, this was their coming out party of sorts, coming out in front of people and being visual, and they could have said anything, and this is what they chose. It's ridiculous. I can only imagine how you were feeling after everything you were going through at that time.
Well, on the topic of what woke me up, so these were little things, right? How my wife was treated, I was treated, that annual meeting, and then, the phone call with that circuit overseer, then a lot of things kept coming to the forefront. I started thinking about stories that were told to me, stories that I knew personally of people. For example, when I was single, this one, not yet brother, baptized, but he was studying and progressing that way. I would hang out with him, and he would take me scuba diving. And so I was like, oh, this was amazing. Scuba diving was just a wonderful experience. And while he was studying, years later, I find out, which creeps me the hell out, I'm hanging out with him and visiting his house at times, mostly scuba diving and such. And while all of this is going on, while he's studying and then getting a proof of baptism, he was molesting his 2 kids. And I found out years later, and it really kind of fucked my head up a little bit, because I'm like, oh my God, I was hanging out with him at the same time he was doing this. So why did Jehovah allow that? Why did he allow him to get baptized? That was a question I had. And then I had dated another woman before I married my wife. And she told me the story that her dad was appointed elder, but was fornicating with another woman. And it was after he got appointed and announced that it finally got exposed. And I'm not sure, I don't remember how, if he kind of felt guilty and admitted it or what. But I'm like, well, why did his appointment go through in the first place if he was doing it? And then I think it was the Lopez or Padron case. After reading that one shook me to my core, because if I have it right, I have to review the facts of the case. He was a ministerial servant. I think he was abusing kids before he was a ministerial servant, but definitely as a ministerial servant was abusing kids. And then he got appointed an elder and continued that abuse. And that was the point I brought up when we had this kind of argument with my in-laws because they were talking about, oh, I knew something. This person got disfellowship, and I felt something wasn't right in the congregation. Yeah, right. And they go through all this, la la la, and then I said, well, on the topic of disfellowshipping, and they were talking about someone getting appointed. I said, this is why I don't believe God's Holy Spirit appoints anyone. And I said, how can it be? And I gave the example of the ex-girlfriend's dad, and also about this case. I said, how is it that God appointed a man who was abusing kids at that time? Oh, well, God's Spirit didn't appoint him. I said, so what, did he just pick and choose? He just turns it on and off? I mean, it was so ridiculous, the answer. They couldn't say anything. And the last thing, of course, well, we depend on Jehovah, and we don't quite all have all the facts and understand everything. I'm like, I have enough facts to understand it quite well. Oh, another thing was interesting. As an elder, one elder in the body, his son had gotten married, and they wanted to recommend him to be an elder. The answer came back, not at this time, from headquarters, society, that they wanted him to get more experience. He had just gotten married. Second time, they requested, the request was sent in for him to become appointed, to be appointed an elder, and they denied it a second time. So he and his wife then go to another country, okay, to serve there. They've been wanting to do that for a long time. Circuit Overseer stops by, right, and was like, why isn't this guy appointed? We need more elders and help, and he's a good guy. So in Spanish, they type out this email, and the elder in my congregation at that time, his dad, forwarded it to me and says, can you decipher what they're saying, they're asking? And my Spanish is the greatest, but I read it. And I said, look, they're asking what responsibilities he had. Is he in good standing, this and that? And would you recommend him as an elder? Well, then issue came up with that because I felt pressured that I had to go along with it. Because I'm like, well, if society said twice no, why are we going to give him an approval to say yes? After back and forth, I just gave in, signed a stupid letter. He got appointed. And I'm thinking later on, how did that happen? And his father was talking to another circuit overseer. I caught wind of the conversation as I approached at the circuit assembly one time and said, ha, 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 my son had to go out of the country in order to get appointed, ha, ha, ha. And I'm looking and like, you manipulated the system. How is this Holy Spirit? If Holy Spirit was saying no, it should say no when he's in another country. This doesn't make any sense. So these things definitely started waking me up, and the last nail in the coffin was the sexual abuse cases. When I first heard that, I couldn't believe my ears. I'm like, no, this is impossible. It must be the media, and the devil's control, distorting facts and and so forth. And then I looked it up and saw news report, and I was like, okay, gotta be careful because I don't want to go on apostate websites or something like that. And so I'm looking for court transcripts and everything that is like, I can tell people I looked at the court transcripts. It wasn't just even the news. And when I read it, that hit me really hard because I'm like, I was an elder, I didn't hear a thing about it. I looked on jw.org under the press release and everything on news around the world. Not one case lawsuit is mentioned there. Oh, and recently they'll talk all about Russia and the banning and all that. Not one case. I was like, okay, at first, denial. This can't be right. Then later on, like, okay, there's always a couple of bad apples in the organization, right? So this can't be, because I used to take pride how they would just beat up the Catholics, and they, articles they would write and say, this is clearly proof that they are not God's, spirit, and not led by God's Spirit, because all the problems they have with pedophilia and just attack the Catholics. But you know what? I had pride because I'm like, this doesn't happen in God's organization, Jehovah's organization. And then it got worse. I found out so many more cases. And I'm like, how is it that our elder body don't know about it either? So after that, we wound up moving to Arizona. So it took a couple of, I think like 3 years or so for me to get the courage to look up more information and even entertain the idea of looking at apostate material. And I remember the day I did it, and I watched it, and I was so scared. I'm like looking over my shoulder, like someone was going to appear there. It's so ridiculous. And make sure my ex-wife was not around to kind of say, "What are you watching?" You know. And after I watched it with my heart, thumping in my chest, I didn't get struck by lightning. I'm like, okay, phew. That led me looking more, and what I found out was just crazy. Uh, uh, One aspect was, and I was able to find a copy of it, 1947 Awake article that talks how they say that disfellowshipping or excommunication is pagan and unscriptural. Then about 5 years later, they start practicing that. And then the flip-flops is what got me. Some of the flip-flops of I had a list here. One of them was those in Sodom and Gomorrah, right? How many times did they flip-flop back and forth? They're going to be resurrected. They're not going to be resurrected. They're going to be resurrected. They're not going to be resurrected, right? So that organ transplants was a hysterical one. Okay, no, you can't have an organ transplant because that's cannibalism, And besides, 607 is another big issue with that, and more flip-flops. So I was focusing on the flip-flops instead of just the new light, because you can't say that's new light when you go from teaching one thing to changing it and then going back to the original teaching. And when I talked to someone about it, they said, well, first century, they didn't understand these things either. They misunderstood stuff. And I said, but wait a minute. That was before Christ went to heaven and his spirit was sent out. He said, you'll understand all these things once your spirit is sent out. So they didn't understand everything, and they made assumptions, so forth. But after the Holy Spirit, Jesus was supposed to be in control, leading them, right? So I said, so does he lead with lies and then kind of corrects them, but then goes back to the original lie? I said, that's Holy Spirit at work. I said, if you read, the whole entire thing of Acts and all, he didn't lead them with falsehoods. He led them with truths. So how is it that one teaching changes and then goes back to the other teaching? How is that how God goes up there and says, oh, I'm going to just, sit back, let them believe this false belief that I'm giving them for a number of years. And then, you know what, later on, I'm going to change it now. And this is new light. So here's the real truth. What you had before was just me fucking with you. So here's the new truth. And you know what, in a few years, I may want to go back to the original thing just for kicks. That's Holy Spirit. It's so it took me about 8-9 months to go through the whole grieving cycle, from denial to the grieving, to the anger, to the bargaining, and finally to acceptance. And because I was like, how could they have lied to me in tears? How could all these years growing up have been wasted? I worked part-time for 13 years. The money I could have made during that time, alone. And how could they lie? Then I was like, how could the motherfuckers lie? And then angry and the whole entire thing. And then coming to the fact, they're a cult. Watching the Australia Royal Commission, and Jeffrey Jackson said there that if someone were to celebrate Christmas and they stopped by, he would be disfellowshipped. And then I look in my elders book. Hell no. It says that's a disfellowshipping offense. So, and Jeffrey Jackson, is an elder. He had part in writing the damn book. So he knew very well that that's a disfellowshipping offense, yet he stood up there and lied to save face for the organization and himself.
Well, I mean, to be fair, he is a guardian of doctrine, a God. So, I mean, he said it right then. Which I thought was amazing when he was dumb enough to say, well, we're the guardians of doctrine. It literally spells God. Like, you literally just appointed yourself.
I never saw that. That's awesome.
Yes, it's ridiculous. It's like, you wake up one day and you almost realize, and it's part of the grieving process too, at least it was for me. Part of the anger came from a feeling almost like I had been pranked for decades of my life.
Yeah.
And, you know, a prank can be funny on Impractical Jokers because everybody knows that this is the game that's being played, the TV show, if you've ever watched that. But it's not so funny when you don't think you're playing a game and you have no idea that anything could even be false, and you're being told it's all true, and your parents have told you it's true, and all your friends told you it was true, everyone you trusted told you it was true. And then you wake up one day and you're like, yeah, it was so much of this was based on just out and out lies. Like 607 and all, and the calculation of 1914 anyway, it's made up. And what 1914 was supposed to have been. And then they keep changing what 1914 was in order to make it fit. And it's just overlapping generations and just ridiculous concepts that they've had to come up with to continue the lie. And then we all got sucked into it. And it doesn't feel good when you look at it.
It doesn't. And
so you have to go through the grieving process. And like you said, come to acceptance. Most of the people involved have very poor tools and are doing the best they can. And a lot of people are getting hurt because of it. And it's just a shame. So that's why we try to help people get out.
Yeah. And just even that one point about the 1947 Awake article, how they said there was unscriptural and pagan. I go on, because supposedly they're doing away with the Watchtower Library CD-ROMs or whatever. So I go online just a couple of days ago, and the Awake articles only go back to 1970, I believe. And if they go this route, all of the damning information from 40s, 50s, and 60s that really show the contradictions and flip-flops in doctrine are not going to be available for the average JW or the new ones coming in. And that's really clever, And so when I scoured the internet and found a PDF of that article, I'm like, I'm saving all of these references because, here is the proof right here. Boom. And how they were members of the United Nations, and there's flimsy excuse with that. If I did the same exact things the governing body did, I'd be disfellowshipped in 2 seconds flat. So it's this ridiculous of double standards and
they're not so faithful or discreet, are they?
No, lies by omission, all this other.
Yeah. It's definitely a double standard for all of it. So you wake up through all of these, death by 1,000 cuts, essentially, all of these things that just keep spilling over, and you just start realizing, so where do things go from there after you fully wake up?
Can I add one more thing?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This is just an interesting thing. Again, as I was reading the Bible without the lenses that they have been given me. And being an elder, especially our elder's book, every time there's a judicial committee where a person will be talked to, possibly disfellowship or not, you're supposed to reread, I think, these 2 chapters in the elder book to refresh your memory and everything, right? You're supposed to. Not everyone does. And so in it talks about trying to see whether the individual who committed that sin did any works benefiting repentance. So if they were fornicating before they came to the elders, did they stop fornicating? Did they stop seeing that person? Did they try to right the wrong, basically? Or after they come the first time and say, oopsie, I did this. And, if they're not disfellowshipped, do they stop or they continue in their behavior? With that principle in mind, how elders are supposed to look to decide whether to disfellowship someone or not, one of the factors, I was reading the story about Judas. And as I was reading it, we were taught that God already foreseen that Judas was going to fall and turn bad. And how the scripture said that the devil went in his heart, figuratively speaking, whatever, and betrayed Jesus and so forth. But when you read all of that, I'm like, first of all, he did make a big goof, right? If you want to believe in the whole entire story of that. And then what happens, he shows works benefiting repentance. That's what it looks like to me. He goes back to the high priest, returns the money, and says what he did was a sin against God or whatever. I forgot the words he used, showing that he acknowledged his sin and he's contrite at it, turns the money, and then is so bothered and moved, devastated from what he did, he winds up killing himself, hanging himself. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. David goes, sins with Bathsheba, he goes and fucks her, and then kills her husband, and because he's sorry, he gets forgiveness and allowed to live. Judas does that, shows the same remorse, returns the money, but he's condemned as this awful villain, but yet God foresaw that, and that was kind of included in his plan to have Jesus die. What the hell? How is that fair or right? That really, when I thought about it, he said, if I was an elder, I wouldn't be disfellowshipping Judas, but yet he gets condemned for all eternity. You know what I mean?
Well, there's a reason and everyone lands where they land, but there's a reason I'm an atheist. And it's things like that don't add up very well, that I can't reconcile. And you didn't forget the part where Jehovah kills David's baby. I mean,
that's not what happened. Jehovah allowed it to happen.
Okay. But there's also the part where it was just interesting as you were saying that about works befitting repentance. So, part of repentance is owning what you did, right? And saying, hey, I did this thing. I messed up, and I'm going to do better. Where has the society, Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, ever demonstrated any repentance? They blame other people. They deny things happen. They whitewash their books. They change quotes. They do things, and they make it all disappear. They never admit that they caused the problem.
Even in 1975, when I found articles that specifically talked about the last few months before the end, and the contradictions later on with, no one knows the day or hour. But in one paragraph above, they're saying in the next few years, the end is coming. Or even more blatantly, when people are selling their houses and going to pioneer work and selling their home, their businesses and everything, they didn't do anything about it.
No, they in fact said that it was a fine way to live in one of the Kingdom Ministries. That was a fine way to live in the end of this system of things, to be getting rid of all your stuff and donating the money to them. Right. That's they were encouraging that stuff. And then have you ever seen in the they call it the Blue Bombshell or something like that, the book The Truth That Leads to Eternal Life? Mm-hmm. There's a quote in there that basically points to 1975. They had used a quote by some authority that points to 75 as maybe when something would happen. And in the 1980 or 82 version of the Truth book, that quote has been replaced by another thing entirely, no mention of 1975. Wow. They knew what they did, and they deliberately you can look at the two books side by side and see that they have changed the quote to get rid of 1975 in that book where it existed previously. They know what they're doing.
It's crazy. I was talking with another person about how it's not Jehovah's Spirit leading them to dispense the spiritual food at the time. I said, because at one time they had said in their articles that blood transfusions weren't a good idea because if you took blood from a thief or whatever, these traits could come out in you. And I said, wait a minute. So God can put in the Bible, centuries ago that, what was the thing that they always try to use? The Bible's not a science textbook when it talks about science and it's accurate about crap.
How about Job and the circle of the earth?
Yeah, the circle. Thank you. Circle of the Earth and a couple others. Oh, God put that in there centuries ago, before even science knew that the Earth was not the center of the Earth. That it revolves around the sun. And okay, so if he could have done that, why isn't he leading the governing body to write that article? Such nonsense. Well, because it probably reflected the belief and ideas at that time. The same thing, cannibal. Well, that was their own doing there, but reflects the knowledge at that time. It's not Holy Spirit, so that's why it sounds so ridiculous. Even if you go back even further with the black men having did it say that as intelligent or differences in that, like, holy crap, that sounds
There's some really racist stuff in some of the old magazines.
But that was God leading them that way,
Yeah, that was Jehovah's Spirit leading the organization at that time. Mm-hmm. It's really disgusting, and it's also very sad how many people have been hurt by this stuff.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And for what? All right, so from there, from your now you're wide awake.
I am.
So what's your path out?
So I think I started fading in 2013, like not going regularly, and then resigning in Elder and Pioneer. And ever since then, boom, just stopped going to service and meeting attendance. And it's amazing because after I stopped the perpetual hamster wheel, it was like weights were lifted off of me. Mm-hmm. Not only having to go and, well, from 3 times a week to 2 times a week to the meetings and then service and all this other stuff. But just not, how do I say this? It was a freedom and a peace. That's the word that I felt that I have never felt before, because, I grew up, and like you, I'm sure, and others, believing that everyone in the world is bad and you're not supposed to be friends with them. They're nice. You could be superficial with them and all, but you can't get close because the world will chew you up and spit you out. And I even repeated those words to others when I was fully indoctrinated too. Be careful of this. And I've met some amazing people that have done things for me more than any brother or sister in the organization ever has, who are quote unquote worldly, because they wanted to, not because a reason like other JWs. Well, I have to because he's my brother, or I have to spend time with him because he's, And I told us that people in the world, quote unquote, again, if they don't want to be friends with you, they won't. So if they do things with you, it's because they want to. There's an assurance and there's a reassurance there, because in JW land, you didn't know if they really liked you. They may just be tolerating you because they feel they had to, And another ex-JW, she married an atheist. And she made this really amazing point. He grew up atheist. His parents were atheists. And he volunteers at soup kitchens and does other volunteer work. And she said to me, when he does this volunteer work, I can really see that it's from his heart. He's not doing it to get a blessing. He's not doing it to get in right with God. He's not doing it out of fear of dying at Armageddon. He's doing it simply because he wants to. But yet every time we've made decisions to help someone, it was because there was an ulterior motive with it, to get them converted, to get Jehovah's blessing on it, his approval, say, hey, look what I did today, Jehovah, you're going to bless me here, or to avoid his wrath and being destroyed. It was always some reason attached to it. Mm-hmm. And that hit me really hard. I'm like, wow, it's nuts. So coming from a pure heart, no, there is no pure heart when you're in this religion trying to do stuff. There's always something that you're trying to avoid or get, And so that made a big impression on me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of people claim that without the Bible or God, you can have no morality. Mm-hmm. Your atheist friend there was a good example of that. He sees people that are hurting or in need, and he cares about them. You don't have to have a threat of a punishment or a reward as a carrot dangling in front of you to be a good person and help people.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I just had to point out one more thing. I'm sorry. And then after that, I'm going
No,
to answer
whatever.
the memorial just passed, right?
Oh yeah.
And so, since my ex and I are divorced, we're selling that house now, and I happen to have a conversation with her. So she's fully indoctrinated. I had made some points before, and she was, thinking, but it's hard because her parents are very much in, and if she wants a relationship with them, she has to play the game or be fully indoctrinated, and I feel bad because that's a situation no one should have to be in. You shouldn't have to choose between living your life with your own opinions and beliefs and then tossing that away to live this other life where you're given your values and what to believe just because you want to see your parents. It's just disgusting to me. So anyway, we got into talking since we were selling the house, and she brought up about the memorial. And, I had seen some videos and everything that talked about preparations for it. And another friend who showed me pictures of friends back home kneading the dough and pouring the wine to get preparation for it. So she says, yeah, and the elders dropped by, the emblems, la, la, la. And I said, are you anointed? She said, of course not. You sat by the memorial by yourself? Uh-huh. And are your parents anointed? No, they're not anointed. You know that. I'm like, but yet the elders still drop by emblems? I said, okay. I said, but why? What's the point? Mm-hmm. I said, if you're not anointed, you don't partake. Why would you need the emblems in the first place? I said, governing body has emphasized over and over that we're just observers, right? And the reason why there is bread and wine there passed at the congregations is in case there's an anointed person that shows up there and then goes to their home congregation or whatever, so they can partake. Otherwise, there's no purpose for it. I'm like, so she goes, well, it's kind of like tradition. I'm like, but you're not anointed. You don't need it. It doesn't matter. Well, and there was like excuses and this and that. And I'm just like, wow.
Oh yeah, the whole Zoom memorial was weird, wasn't it? And where are the observers in the original institution of this arrangement? There's no observers. It was anointed people who were there. They were the only people who were there. What in the world is everyone doing showing up there anyway? It's not your celebration. It's not. It wasn't instituted in that way. So if you're going to be picky about it, and you're going to be picky about how things go, then you shouldn't be there.
Right. Good point. Really good point.
Yours. So it's they pick and choose, but also just the weirdness with the passing of it and the rigorous way that's done. Where even when there is a meeting, a memorial at a Kingdom Hall or another place in public, where all the attendants have been passed the emblems at the end of literally every row. But then afterward, they all walk up and they make this big show of the speaker passes it down through the attendants. They've already been passed to. What the attendants have been passed this thing 10, 20 times. What are we doing? Again, it's just for show. It's just a ritual. They have their one ritual that they can hang their hat on. That's it.
So true. So true.
Just to have a thing. So then where do you go from here again? So, I mean, you mentioned the ex-wife, so obviously some things have changed over, time. So how does your life progress?
Well, after I was able to research more on religion and see all the lies by omission, the falsehoods, the changing of flip-flopping of doctrine, and even of 1914, and even stating before that the end was coming and so forth, that most people don't know about. And grieving all that, I came to the acceptance and peace. This is what happened. They are a cult. If you want to go down the checklist of what cult organizations do, they have all of them. And that was the last thing that was shackling me to coming out of the closet. So I wanted to, and after fading, that my life improved, but then I still was sometimes going into depression because I was still trying to stifle that part of me. Conversion therapy taught me how to distract myself as much as I can, but it didn't change my orientation. And I tell people, because other religions will say it's a choice. I said, I didn't choose this. Hell no, I wouldn't choose this. If you would have been like the Matrix and given me the red pill or the blue pill, and the one says straight or gay, I would have taken the straight pill so I could become straight. I wouldn't have want any of this ridicule and all this other rejection and everything from being gay. So, but because I was struggling emotionally with it, and thought about it, like I really don't believe in the concept that God, wrote the Bible with all these things in there, or if he did, he's not as good as he appears. I don't think I want to worship a God like that, So I said, why am I struggling and being depressed? And the only thing that was holding me back was my wife. I didn't want to hurt her. But at the same time, I had to think of it the other way. I'm holding her back from being with someone who can be fully emotionally and in with her for her. So I decided to come out, and I talked with her about it, and it was hard, but she had mentioned, she said, I know how hard you worked on it, because at one point I was suicidal. And that was another thing where the elders dropped the ball, because my wife went and said he almost jumped over the bridge in DC. I thought about her, and I didn't have things all set. And so actually a cop had escorted me off the bridge. But so she had told one of the elders, and she told me his response, that he got teary-eyed and this and that, but they never followed up with it. I don't understand that. So right after that is where I got into therapy. Being suicidal, I told her the full reasons of why I was that way. I said, all of this that was going on plus this. And I said, conversion therapy hasn't worked. I had hoped it would. And she admitted, I know how hard you worked on that, and so I appreciated that.
Yeah.
And so I said, I can't keep living like this, because I'm afraid I'll get more and more depressed. I'm so happy being out, but then this one thing is still pulling me down, not being able to live life authentically. So it was hard. She understood, but it wasn't easy for her because she didn't sign up for that. And she went through her grief process and was angry too. And I agree. Okay, yes, you're angry and you didn't sign up for this and it's not fair. I said, but it's also part of the religion that led me to think that this is what I had to do, and which
prevented me from fair to you either.
Yeah,
it's not fair to anybody.
Prevented me from coming out earlier, and maybe 10 years ago, maybe I wouldn't have got married if I was come out. So, and she understood that it was just, of course, she was losing someone and didn't think that was happening. So she had to grieve her way, and I had to also. And so coming out has been bittersweet, because it's been great to not hide anymore or kind of put on this costume or this mask that it's not fully me. And coming out with other friends, worldly friends and straight friends, I was afraid that they find out, oh, no way. And so I lost a few. Majority were very supportive, which I was really grateful and thankful for. And so that part has been good for me, and hopefully for her. I hope she can recognize that this is actually a positive thing, and for her not being stuck with a man who really can't give her everything that maybe a hetero man, can, in the sense of how we receive and give love. But anyway, so right before that, I did write my disassociation letter. That was 2019. And because I decided after thinking, what are my values? What do I really believe? I've been told what to think, what to believe, what my values are for all my life. And I had to rethink things for myself. And I came to the conclusion, you know what? I don't believe in this Jesus, Christmas, birthday, whatever, but it looks fun. So I want to celebrate Christmas. So that year I did. And I just told my wife at that time, make sure you just blame everything on me. I want it, so you have to be submissive. And I put my tree up and all. But I knew that they would probably eventually see that. I had Christmas lights and all. And that was just one step away from being disfellowshipped. So to avoid that, I had thought about writing my disassociation letter for a year before that, but never did anything. Finally sat down, wrote it out. I used Lloyd Evans' book to help outline the letter, the apostate therapy. And gave it in. And that was it. So they visited my house, though. So at that time, my wife didn't want shepherding visits either. I have not met any of the brothers here in Arizona. And but lo and behold, after that letter's in, they show up, right? First time I wasn't there. My sister was visiting and answered the door. And 2 days later, they came. I was like, I don't know, 8 o'clock at night. They were trying to make sure I was home. And I was livid because in the letter I said, there's no need, after much thought and consideration, this is my decision. There's no need to stop by. Basically, this is my final decision. Do not come. And they showed up. And I looked at them. I said, what did my letter say? Well, we just wanted to check on you. I said, what did my letter say? Did it say that you can come here? Well, no. I'm like, well, then you're not respecting my wishes. I do not want you coming here anymore. I said, I already said this was my final decision. And if you come again, I will call the police, file a restraining order, and you will be trespassing. And so after that, they left and never came back. So so I'm out. I have a partner. Things are good. And I'm just enjoying life much more. And I'm happier, which is so odd because they say once you leave and go into the world, you're not going to be happy. And the people there, I'm like, I've met so many awesome people. And yeah, I am happier than ever than being in the organization. So
I agree. I am too. And I get it. I'm really happy to see now that you can live an authentic life. How can you really be happy living inauthentically, living a life where you have to constantly push aside your own thoughts on things, your own feelings on things to adopt the new personality, or, they refer to it as the mind of Christ or whatever. Like, how can you ever be truly happy when you're having to constantly push yourself down to try to play a role? It's like we were actors in a play. We've been given a role our entire lives, and we were playing that role, but that's not who we were. That role doesn't fit us. It was the identity we put on because it was the identity we were given. But at some point, when you start to realize that that's not who I am, you either leave or you're going to stay in and be very depressed, have a lot of cognitive dissonance issues, probably a lot of anxiety, and just you can exist in it, but you won't be happy. And now you get to be happy in the one and only life that anyone can prove that we actually have conclusively. You get to experience it fully as yourself. Obviously, you have things to work on, I'm sure. The scars of the past, don't just go away. But, it sounds like you've been working in therapy and doing things. So I'm just really happy that you get to be Ryan. That's it. It's like a lot of people ask me now, if they hear my story and I tell them that I'm no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses and I kind of give them the whole spiel, they'll be like, well, so, if you don't mind me asking, what are you now? Mm-hmm. I'm Mike. That's it. I'm Mike. I don't need a label. I don't need a religious label or any other. I'm
Simple.
Mike, and there's pros and cons to that, I'm sure. But
Mm.
I'm Mike, and if you get to know me, you'll know who Mike is. But I can't give you a fancy label by which you can suddenly put me in a box. I'm Mike. So it always makes me happy to see people be able to get out and, go be Ryan. Whoever that is, just be Ryan and be happy with it. That's all that matters.
I was on antidepressants for years. I remember trying to come off of them one time while I was indoctrinated. Couldn't do it. Went right back on them. After I faded and then did the research to see that this was a cult, I tried coming off them again. No problem. I haven't been back on them. Of course, you have ups and downs at times with things, grieving, loss of friends and shunning, but I haven't been back on them. So
Good for you. Good for you. There's I've alluded to it before. There's a talk that a brother Matt gave that was recorded and sent around, and all the brothers and sisters had it, at least in the congregations I was in. And he talked about how he gave this at a convention or at Bethel. I don't remember, but he was just talking about friends. We're all just living on pills and prayers. And I was thinking, that's no way to live, man. Like, who wants to live on pills and prayers? How about go be? That's why I end every podcast with love others, do no harm, and go be happy. Go be happy. That's what we're here to do. Why spend your whole life being miserable? We did that for years. Whatever it is, if it floats your boat, whether it's an interest in life or just who you are, as a sexual orientation or something that you've always wanted to go for in life, you only get this one chance that anyone can prove, so go for it. Mm-hmm. And you might as well. What else? What do you have to lose? We already lost so much. So I'm really happy for you. Getting to that point just a little bit about your new life, what is it that you enjoy? And is there anything that you have in mind that you'd like to pursue?
Oh my goodness. The problem is I like too many things, and I usually have to narrow it down because I especially now that I have more time. But one of the things that has been on my mind for a few years is I always wanted to be a writer. One of the things, right? And so as I kept thinking about it, I'm like, why don't I just start? So I've taken some workshops here and all to better know how to write. Because I was wanting to be an activist, but so many things already covered out there. I could give my slant on or my opinion. And I thought I'd like to write a book. It happens to be young adult themed. And a way of being an activist, but including it in a fiction type book. So I have a little excerpt here. The book that I'm in the beginnings of writing, which I've thought about for a couple of years, Open Anchor. And it's basically about a teen who happens to be 17.
Did you say Open Anchor?
Hope.
Oh, Hope and Anchor?
Yes. That's a preliminary theme I have, title for the book. And it's about a teen, happens to be 17, in high school who tries to escape her suppressive religious upbringing and the risks and consequences faced when being true to herself. That's kind of like a one-sentence synopsis of it. So in it, I'm hoping to be able to shine some light on not only culture, the attitude, the beliefs, the thinking, so that it can be more known, hopefully, but as a way of incorporating it into the story. So the protagonist, Kylie, grows up, JW, and a lot of other things happen, and it just shows the progression and the expectations to kind of climb that ladder, even though she's a girl, and contrasting that with the other protagonist, who comes from a completely different sphere and their view on things and so on and so forth, and how they collide and what she has to go through and blah, blah, blah. So it's has a lot of aspects and themes in it that it has a little bit of gay theme. It has, of course, the being true to yourself theme for her, and contrasting that with the guy she falls in love with, on how more balanced life is with his family. And so hopefully, I got to kind of set a deadline so I can keep working towards it. But yeah, I'd like to get that book out and published, hopefully.
That is awesome. I hope to see that um, at a deadline that you set for yourself. I hope to see that book because I think that the more media, just in general, that is created in this ex Jehovah's Witness genre, if you want to call it that or whatever, I think that it really helps, and more people will be able to be inoculated against the life that is brought by it if they know ahead of time what it's really about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
May we save some people from being hurt. So, well, I appreciate your time. I love getting to meet you. I appreciate hearing your story. You've been through so much. Just really glad to see that you have the opportunity to be happy now. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to address in particular, or just anything you wanted to say at the end? I just give you that opportunity in case there's, because I know there's other questions, but we don't always get to all of them.
Just that if any that know me or don't, that are questioning or curious as to why someone like me would leave, or all the others that you've interviewed as well, I would just really encourage them to look at good sources and reach. So yeah, you're not going to go to apostate websites and all, but you can go to court transcripts. That's exactly what's being said verbatim. You can look at other news reports, and not everything is under the devil's control. It's just crazy how they feel that, well, if it's positive, they'll relish in it and everything. That's good, and they'll advertise and tell everyone. But if it's anything negative, oh, they're twisting things and all. But really, just do the research. Look at the flip-flopping doctrines, double standards, false predictions. And for those who do know me, I'm here. I love you. And I hope one day that you'll be able to see what I'm seeing, and hopefully we can connect again.
Yeah, I love that. Your door is open, right?
It is. Always has been.